This is Ian O'Keefe. This is color separation for screen printing, the slow, boring, and right way. This is going to be my first tutorial. It's a two-color vector customer file. It's not entirely vector. It's a PDF that my client, the screen printer, has sent me, that their customer sent them. And let's take a look at it. The first thing I'm going to do is to open up a registration marks template. This is an Illustrator document, and it's just got a couple of registration marks and some slug information. I use this because the screen printer that I am working with, they don't like the default registration marks that Photoshop generates when it prints. The line weight is a little too light, so it doesn't resolve on the lower frequency screens. So this is a nice bold line. This is my template. Now I'm going to go ahead and place the customer's file into this template. This is the file itself. It's a PDF. Let's open it up. I got an error, but I think it's going to be fine. I've already looked at the file. Let's take a look at it. Okay, I don't see any font substitution or any missing graphics. Those are generally the problems that you're going to see when you're importing or placing a PDF into Illustrator. So I think we're good to go. I'm going to go ahead. This document is, I think, 11.2 inches wide by 13.5 tall. This is the size that I've established with the screen printer, is sort of the maximum area that will work with the main printer that they use to generate the vellum. So I'm going to move this up close to the top registration mark. Not so close that it's going to make it hard to tape over the registration mark once the screen is burned and the screens, the two different colors, have been registered, but pretty close. I don't want to waste too much space. Okay, this is the scale tool. I'm going to select this. I'm going to click toward the top of the graphic, and then I'm going to drag it out while holding down Shift to constrain the aspect ratio, make it as big as I possibly can within the constraints. And it's a little too close. Let me make it a little bit smaller. Okay, I think that's good. Center it just a little. We can see the center of this, the center of this, and the center of this ought to all line up, and they don't, but I'm not going to fix that. It's customer's art, so I'm going to give them what they want. Okay, this is the front. The PDF is a 2-page PDF, so I'm going to go ahead and save as. And wait for the pinwheel. This will be South Park front vector. And before I forget, I'm going to change the name down here in the slug. This will be South Park front. Okay, I'll resave it. Now I'm gonna do the same for the art on the back. File, place. This is the customer's file here. This time I'm gonna select show import options. This will let me pick the page that I want to import. And I'll go to the second page. This is the back of the shirt. Again, it gives me an error, but I can take it. Okay, let's center. And I'm just dragging this. I'm going to eyeball it. I'm going to use Shift and the up arrow to move it up, just to nudge it. Maybe one more. Okay, that's pretty good. And then I'll go over here, get the scale tool, go toward the top of the art, and then drag out while holding down Shift to constrain the aspect ratio. That's pretty close, but we see this is too wide, so I'll narrow it down a little. Again. And I am holding down Shift to constrain the aspect ratio because it's going to look awful if I distort it horizontally or vertically. I don't want to do that. So this is pretty good. It's right toward the edge. So I'm just going to nudge it a little to the left. And we're good to go. Okay. Change this to back. And then save as. South Park back vector. Now you'll see this is a tan color. This is a color that is not used at all in the artwork, either the front or the back. So this is going to let me select it easily once we open it in Photoshop to separate the colors out. All right, I'm closing the file and I'm going to quit Illustrator just to free up any extra memory that I can. Always a good habit because the more RAM you have, the better. Okay. Now I'll take the front, select it, and drag it down to Photoshop. Okay. So this is the import PDF dialog box. We want to, I like to set my page size when I'm putting in the registration marks. And so I don't want to resize it here. I'll go ahead and set it to media box. And that'll use whatever I set up as the page dimensions in the Illustrator document I was using. I'm going to turn off anti-aliased because anti-aliasing won't give us a smooth, crisp edge. It'll end up blurry. The image size I see matches what was in the Illustrator document. We're going to constrain proportions, resolution. A lot of people say you should work at 300 dpi. I like to throw a little extra resolution at it because you can always expand it a little bit without it getting too jaggy. So I work at 600 if I'm working with a solid spot color. If I'm doing a lot of halftones, I will work at 1200. And this image is going to have some halftones, but I'm going to put them in at the last minute. Okay, mode, US web coded. Let's change it to RGB color just because it saves a little bit of space. Bit depth 8, that's fine. And okay. All right. So now we're working with a rasterized version of the Illustrator document that we were looking at. And this will be our first really close look at this image. You see that they placed what looks like it was probably a JPEG in here. We have some artifacting going on, and other than that, it looks pretty good. You look at really close at it and it looks pretty bad, but this is a pretty small image on a larger shirt. Once we throw halftones in and print it, it's going to be hard to see into this raster. So, and just by looking at it with my eye, it looks like it's going to work pretty well as a two color. We got black and we got red. So I'll use Command 0. That's a keyboard shortcut to show me the entire screen. We have this checkerboard pattern in the back. It's very distracting, and I'm easily distracted, so I'm going to get rid of it. This is a transparent background, and the checkerboard indicates that it's transparent. I'm going to go to the layer menu, flatten image, and it's gone. Right. Okay, now I got to get the lasso tool, and I'm going to draw a lasso around this graphic here. Now we've got a drop shadow here. I want to zoom in and make sure that I haven't lassoed any of that, and I haven't. So this selection I'm going to save. Now there are two ways that I can save selections. I can go to the select menu and save selection. I call this shield cell, and it will create it by default as a new channel. Now we see over here, this is our channels palette, and you can think of a channel as a grayscale image that can be used as a selection or as a spot color. In this channel palette we have RGB, which is composed of red, green, and blue, and each of these is a channel. If we look at them separately, we can see they look a lot different than the thing as a whole. So we can use these to help separate the colors out. So let's do that. If we click on the red, because it's a red channel, the red sort of cancels itself out. So you see the things in that channel that aren't red. So I'm going to select all. I'm going to show the whole page. I'm going to copy. I'm going to create a new channel, and I do that with this little new channel button at the bottom of the channel palette. And then I'm going to paste into place. The into place ensures that it's going to go exactly here in the same place as where I copied it from. So otherwise, sometimes if you're lassoing something or using the marquee to select something and you paste it, it'll just center it, or it'll paste it in off center, and all of this stuff has to register, so it needs to be in the same place. So just as a habit, I always paste in place. Okay, so this is going to be the black spot color. So right now it's called Alpha 1. I'll double click. We'll call this 1 black spot. And actually, let's call it 2. The number at the beginning is going to indicate the print order. And screen printing, you're going to want to print light ink to dark ink, and black is the darkest ink. So we got 2 inks here. It'll be number 2. The reason I put spot at the end is to identify just by name as a spot color and to differentiate it from any of the default channels. If this was a CMYK document, the K channel would be called black. And if I just called this black, then it's going to be confusing. So I always like to say that it's a spot color. Then I'm going to spec it as spot here, and I'm going to change the color to something close to black. Again, we don't want to make it confusing by using the same color, so I am not going to drag it all the way into the corner. If I do, sometimes Photoshop will rename it as black because it's a pure black. So we just want to get it close to there. This color doesn't have to be exact. This is just to give us an idea of what it's going to look like. So we'll hit OK. Set solidity to 80% and hit OK. Now let's go into green. Green is sort of the opposite of red, so this will be a good starting place for our red separation. You know, maybe let's look up close at this and see which one has less artifacting. Yeah, I think I like green better. Okay, so select all, copy, create a new channel, paste in place. Okay, and then I'm going to zoom back out. And let's deal with the solid colors first. We've got this red. Now I selected the red with the magic wand tool, and it only selected the red here because up here in the contextual toolbar, contiguous is selected. We're going to unselect that. It's at 16, which is a pretty good tolerance to work with. Let's see what happens when I select red here. We see it looks like it got all of the solid red and a little bit of the red in here. So that's good. Let's go into this red channel. And what I'm going to want to do is to clean up some of the stuff around the red. So let's invert the selection. Right now the red is selected and we want to get rid of the stuff around it. So we'll go to the select menu, inverse. And we can see the marching ants around the outside. And that means that the background and the stuff up to the selection are selected. I'm just going to go in here with a giant pencil and clear some of this stuff out. We want to use a pencil and not a brush, because a brush is going to give us a fuzzy edge, and we don't want that. So the bigger the pencil, the easier this is going to be. And we want this to be totally white, so I'll usually click here to get the default values. White is in the foreground. Now I'm using my my open bracket to reduce the size of the pencil, and then my closed bracket to increase the size of the pencil. And And I decreased it because that's a tricky little spot around the shield that I didn't want to cover up any of the shield with white. And get all the stuff that's close to the shield here with a smaller pencil tip. And then now that we've cleaned that off, we can increase the size of the pencil tip. And I mean, I guess you could do this a lot of ways. You could use the lasso tool and select and then fill in the selection. But I am using the pencil tip. I'm going to zoom in, make sure I get this all right. Now this is going to be the red channel, and we see we've got the slug information down here. So as long as we have the background selected, let's get rid of black on here. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to deselect some of this red here. To do that, I'm going to use the lasso tool, and then I'm going to hold down the Option key on the Mac, and you see the little minus sign shows up next to the lasso, so I'll lasso that. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to add to it. Sometimes it's hard to keep all this stuff straight in your head. So instead of the Option key, I'll hold down the Shift key, and that will let me add to the current selection. Okay. Now I'm going to invert the selection again. So that now just a solid red is selected. And I am going to make it completely black. If you look close, it's a little bit gray. So the best way to do this is to go to Image, Adjustments, Threshold. And it gives you the default threshold. That's fine. You see how much more black everything is? Okay. Also, when I set this channel up, I never named it, and I didn't spec it as a spot color. So I'll double click it. This will be one red spot. Click spot color. You see red is the default, so that's good. Let's give it 80% solidity. The solidity affects the translucency of the channel when you're previewing it with the other spot colors. So it'll give you an idea of what it's going to look like on the shirt. If you've ever had to do a white underbase, if the solidity on here is 100 and you've got white under it, you wouldn't be able to see it. But if you drop it down to a lower percentage, you'll be able to see where the underbase starts. This comes in really handy when you're doing trap and choke. Okay. Now, if you're printing, let's say we had a light gray shirt. To preview this, I would create a new channel, call this shirt, make a spot color, pick a light gray, and if you think about it as this being the shirt, you'd normally think about the ink going on top. So the light ink, the red, and then the darker ink, the black, going on top of that. With Photoshop, it's in reverse order. So we're going to take this red and put it underneath the shirt, and the black and put it underneath the red. I just flip it upside down. Now, if we select shirt, turn it on so we can, the view toggle here, so we can see it. Then select the red spot and then the black spot. Then we get an idea sort of what we're dealing with. We've got our selection. Let's deselect all. So that doesn't look too bad, except we've got this sort of rich black here. It's a combination of the red and the black. We really don't want the red to be all over this like that. So let's look at the original RGB to get an idea what we're working with. In here, the only red we have is in the inside of this shield and this little ponytail that we have on top. So we're going to go to the red spot, select that, and I'm just going to draw out a bunch of this with the pencil tool. Make sure white is in the foreground. Zoom in. Get the pencil and just start getting rid of it. Okay, so now let's go to the black spot and see what we need to do there. This all looks pretty good. We want to make these blacks a little blacker. So we'll get the magic wand tool, select this, and I'm going to go ahead and lasso out this whole seal in the middle. We're going to deal with that separately. This is just the letters and the drop shadow, and really just the solid black that I want to deal with. So I'm going to zoom in, make sure that none of the drop shadow is selected. Then I'm going to image, adjust, threshold, and that will make it a nice solid black. Also, because this is the black spot color, I'm going to get rid of where it says red here by drawing a marquee box around it, and then edit, fill, using white at 100%. Then, just for good measure, I'm going to take the rest of this, select it with a marquee, and then this one as well. I'll add to the selection by shift selecting. And then I will go to image, adjustments, threshold. And with the default, you see this drops out because it was a light tan color. So we're going to drag this over to where we can see it. That is good. Okay, let's do the same thing with the red spot. Adjustments, threshold, drag it over. Usually if we got a spike and another spike, I'll drag it to the place where I can see what I want, and it's halfway in between the spikes. That's usually works pretty well. Okay, so now let's see what we got. We can get rid of this shirt because I was just using that to give you an idea of what it would look like with the shirt, but the shirt we're going to be printing on is white, so we'll select that channel and delete it. Zoom in on this guy here, and we see that this is a little bit too light, so we're going to go to the black spot channel. We can't see it well because red spot is turned on, so we'll toggle off the view and get the lasso tool, or what we could also do is just go to the select menu, load selection, and you remember we did a selection earlier, set it as new selection and OK, and there you have it. So what I'm going to do here is make this a nice solid black. To do that, I'm going to use curves. Because this is selected, this is the only thing that's going to be affected by the curves adjustment. Image, adjustments, curves, use the black eyedropper tool. And if we're looking at this over here, when we click, we see it positions us kind of right under this spike. But you can see in here we have a little bit of artifacting still. That's because some of that stuff is a little bit lighter than what we selected. So let's just drag it right here so that that spike in the histogram is completely taken out of the curve. Hit OK. Now we have a nice solid black. And I think this will work. There are a couple of things I want to do. We have this fuzzy edge that's going to look bad when we halftone it. So I got to make it a nice, crisp, clean edge. And the way that I'm going to do that is by creating another selection. I can do this with a lasso, so I'm going to zoom out so that we can get the whole shield in one spot. I'm going to use the space bar, which will turn my lasso tool into the grabby hand. Zoom out again, and I'm doing this with a keyboard shortcut. This is the Command key, which is also the Apple key, and the minus sign, so that zooms out. Okay, make sure we get the lasso here. And what I want to do, I have this whole shield selected, but I want to subtract the inner part. So to do that, we hold down the Option key, and we see we get the lasso with a little minus. So now I'm just going to draw inside this big, heavy black outline on the whole thing. I want to get this in one shot. If you really wanted to do this right, you could get these parts too, all of this stuff, by drawing inside of this white outline here, but I'm not going to go that far. I just don't want it to have a fuzzy outer edge. That's the most noticeable part of the shield. And again, like I said, we're going to throw a coarse halftone at this, so it's not going to be that noticeable inside here. But on the edge, you'll be able to see it more. So if we just went here and thresholded, let's see what happens. See, it's pretty jaggy, because this image isn't at 600 dpi. It was rasterized at 600 dpi, but the image itself that it was using for the rendering is at a lower resolution. So we see how nice and crisp this edge is. This is crisp, but it's jagged. So let's undo the threshold. The way to deal with this is to blur. This doesn't fix it, but it makes it less noticeable. Go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and the way to do this is to drag all the way to the left and then nudge it to the right until you can not see the raster anymore. And that's right at about 2 pixels in this case. We hit OK. And now if we threshold, we see this is as crisp looking as that without the jagged edge. The drawback is that corners get rounded out, like here, here, and here. But that's a lot less noticeable than a jagged edge around the whole thing. Okay, let's zoom out. I think we're pretty good. I think the only thing we might want to play around with is this ponytail. let's take a look at that. We'll turn on both the red and the black, and we see that there's going to be some red outside of this line, which we don't really want. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get the pencil tool. I'm going to switch white to the foreground, and then I'm just going to draw it out. Basically, I want the red to go to what would be, if this were at full resolution, the center of this black line. Now I'm trying to draw and nothing is happening because I have a selection, and this is not part of it. So I'm just going to deselect from the select menu. Now when I draw, I can see the stuff goes away. So I'll just get the edge of the circle and run it down the center of where that black line is supposed to be. This is basically trapping the red underneath the black. I mean, I guess technically it was already trapped underneath the black. It's just keeping it from spreading. This is where the slow and boring part comes in. No, it's pretty exciting. Okay, I think we've gone around the entire thing. Now we're going to turn off black, and we look at this. Really, we want this whole red section to be solid. So let's lasso it. And threshold it. So this is going to be a solid red with black halftones on top. And then let's look at the RGB version. This should probably be pretty close to solid over here. Then over here, this probably shouldn't drop below 25%. So let's go back to the red spot. We're going to zoom in on the shield interior. I'm going to lasso that. And I'm going to use curves. So image, adjustments, curves. Get this black eyedropper and click it over here. We see it positions it under that spike. I'm going to move it to the right of that spike just to make some of that stuff totally black. And then this, let's just drag this down a little bit. Drag it up a little bit. We want it a little bit lighter. But not too light. Okay. So that's pretty good, except we don't have any trap set except for the ponytail. Let's look at it together and zoom in on the ponytail. Make sure this looks all right still. And I think it does. Another way to check this, you think about it, you have the black spot on top of the red. We can just flip it so that you're printing red second over the black, and you can see where it goes exactly. We might want to clean this up just a little bit. Get the pencil tool. Make black the foreground. Go to deselect. Just going to draw any of these places where we see the red. Let's see the light edge popping out. Here. It isn't going to matter that much. Okay. Put them back in the correct order. Zoom out. Now we're going to set a little bit of trap. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the lighter color, the red, and then the way that we do that is to go into the select menu, load selection, channel 1, red spot, new selection, OK. And we see the red is selected. Now we're going to modify the selection. We'll go modify, expand. Let's expand it by 7 pixels in this case. This is going to be a little over a 1 point line. If we zoom in, we can see that sort of splits this black outline, which is exactly where we want it. The reason that we use trap is because it is going to make it easier to print. If the registration isn't dead on, we're not going to see a white gap in between the colors, because the lighter color will spread out so it gets trapped underneath the darker color. So right now we have a selection that shows where we want it to trap, but we don't want the red to expand out into places where it's not going to be covered by a darker color. So what we do is go to select, load selection, get the black spot, and intersect with selection. This will mean that the only thing that is selected is where the black overlaps the gray. Now let's save this selection. We'll call this black overlap. And this is pretty good, except we've got the drop shadow plays into it a little bit, and we don't really want that. What we want is only the solid white here. So we can just use the selection tools on this black overlap selection like it's an image. We select this gray, which we don't want, and we'll fill it with white or with black. The white represents what we want selected. Also, we don't want any of that, so I lasso it edit, fill with black. Let's look at this. We see it goes into this drop shadow. So it's the outside of all of these that we don't want. So how are we going to get rid of that in this overlap? Let's turn off RGB. If we look really close, we see that this outside is a gray and this is a solid white. So we can select the solid white with a lower tolerance, and it's only going to select that and not this. Let's make it 1 and see what happens. Zoom out. That looks pretty good. Let's make sure none of the outside is selected. We got little points, but nothing much else. So we've selected what we want to keep, and we want to get rid of all the rest. So we go select inverse. That selects everything but what was selected. Then edit, fill with black. Now we just want to clean up. We got these little spots here we need to get rid of. So I'll deselect here. Get my pencil tool. I'm going to increase the size. Make sure black is the foreground. And just draw this stuff out. Basically, this channel is only going to be what is going to be trapped. And I think we're good. Let me get rid of these registration marks. Now, I'll go back to red, select, load selection, get black overlap, and add, create a new selection. We zoom in, we can see it's going to spread out, and if we show the black, we can see it's going to spread out only into the black. So this is exactly what we want. Let's turn view off on the black channel. Go to edit, fill, black. Okay, and we see it spreads out. Let's look at the, let's deselect first. Then look at the two together. And if we change the print order, we can see what the spread looks like. I'm going to make the solidity 10% on this, and this will give us a really good indication of where the trap is. You can see the overlap here. This is with the red over the black, and this is with the red under the black. So this is trapped and ready to go to the next stage, which is going to be creating the halftones for the whole thing. At this point, I like to save my file. Go save. Here's the South Park folder, and I'm going to call this South Park Front Working. SEPs working. Whoops. It was set up to save it as a PDF. Let me save. Steps working. Photoshop. Save. Okay. Now we're going to increase the resolution. When we do this halftone, we want to be working in a 1200 dpi file. But 1200 dpi uses a lot more memory, a lot more space, and so we are from this point going to be working getting rid of some of the stuff that we don't need so that we'll have a smaller file. To do that, I'm going to go to the mode of the file, change it to multi-channel. We see it change RGB to cyan, magenta, and yellow because it started with 3 other primary channels. It only has 3 to fill in. We don't have a black channel. It doesn't matter because it's multi-channel. We don't have to have these anymore. And we've already done all the work that we need to with selections and editing of the file, so we can get rid of these. We don't need them as reference. So I'm just going to click, shift click, shift click, shift click, delete those. I'm also going to get rid of this overlap channel that we created. We don't need that. Going to go to the image menu, image size. We're going to make this 1200. 1200 is good because it's a multiple of the 600 that we were working with, so we'll still have nice crisp edges, providing that this resample drop down is set up with nearest neighbor. And it reminds you, hard edges. We want hard edges. Okay. So now that that is done, we are going to create the halftones themselves. Now, I'm going to be sending these halftones as separate bitmap files. A bitmap file means that every pixel is a bit and every bit is off or on. So these are very small files compared to this Photoshop file, which is 8 bits per channel. A bitmap file is 1 bit and it's only 1 channel. So we're going to break each channel into its own file. So I got the red spot selected. I'm going to select all. Create a new file. You see it fills in all the information. This is not right. It's 1200 here. Okay. Select all. Edit, copy. Oh, that was a mistake. Okay. Select all. Edit, copy. I think I hit cut. Okay, so I copied, create a new document, and we see it fills in the 1200 here. In grayscale, this is what we want because it's using the defaults of whatever file is on the clipboard that we just copied. We don't need to deal with the name now. We hit OK. Edit, paste. And this is going to be our red bitmap. Right now it's a grayscale, so we'll convert it to bitmap, and when we do that, it'll give us the options for the halftone. Flattening layers is fine. A method is halftone screen. And because we're working with 2 halftones that are going to be on top of each other, we want angles that complement each other. So if I have two, generally I'm going to start out with 15 for one. And I had it set up as a 38 LPI line per inch screen. We zoom in, we can see this edge is a little jaggy, but that's okay. This is a customer file. It's not going to be perfect. Now, it's a bitmap. We'll go and we'll save it. I'm going to click on one of these files just to steal the name information for it, and then change it to what I want it to say. South Park front 1 red. .psd. Save. Go back to the separation working file. Look at the black spot. Select all. Copy. Create a new file. I don't need to name it. We'll hit OK. Paste. And change it to a bitmap. Flatten layers is OK. This will say halftone screen. It's left over to default from the last time we used it. OK. Oops. I hit OK too many times. And also I see we're getting a little bit of a screwy thing here. We're getting a halftone there that we do not want. So, don't save. I don't know why it's doing this, but let's get rid of it. Tolerance is 1. It selected a lot of this gray area we don't want. So let's do contiguous. I think that'll work. Shift click there, shift click there, shift click there, there. I don't want to go back to the previous version of the file to do all this stuff, so I can just magic wand it out. I want to make sure we get the insides on these letters where there's something looped in, like the R, the A, the P. I don't know why I did that, but it'll be fixed now. Shift F5 and we'll fill with white. That looks fine. So let's try this again. Select all, edit, copy, file, new. OK. Paste. Image, mode, bitmap, flatten in layers, halftone screen, OK. Now we're going to change the angle because this is going to lay over the top of the other one, and we don't want them to be at the same angle or a similar angle, or we'll get a moire pattern. So I use 15 and 75 if I've got two colors. If I've got one halftone, I'll use 45 because that's the furthest angle from the lay of the fabric on the screen. So we'll get the best chance of the dots resolving. And it's a 38 LPI. This is the frequency I've determined with this screen printer. Often uses low frequency screens. These dots will still resolve and give a nice dynamic range. So let's save the file. I'm going to select the last one that we did and then just change the name. This will be to black. Save. Now let's get the red file, select all. I'm going to do this with keyboard shortcuts. It's Command A, Command C. Go back to the working file, go to the red channel, Command V, and we see the dots show up here. Do the same with the black. Command A, Command C, go back to the working file and select the black channel and paste in place. And we see the halftone dots show up here now. We turn them both on and we can see a close-up of the dots. Let's reverse the order and we get to see where they overlap. And this looks good to me. It's ready to go. So I'm going to save this SEP working file as half-toned. Close that. Close these. Okay, now often in this case I also want to generate a preview for my client to send to the customer so that they can approve it. Because once they sign off on it, if it doesn't come out like they hoped, we don't have to eat it. So I'll open up Illustrator and go to File, Open Recent Files, South Park Front Vector. This is going to be set up exactly the same size as the Photoshop bitmap files that we just created. Select everything and delete it. File, Place. I'll get the colors in the order that they would print, so we'll get the red and place it. And because it's a bitmap file, we can apply a spot color to it. So we'll make it red. Go to the File menu, Place. Now we're going to get the black. South Park Front to Black, Place. Okay, let's register them, and to do that we'll use the selection tool, draw a box that ropes both of these in. We'll hit the horizontal align and the vertical align, and now they're right on top of each other. We're just going to drag so that they're snapping to the corner, and then save as. And we're going to call this South Park Front Preview. Save it as an Illustrator file. Now the customer can't deal with an Illustrator file. But we're going to take this Illustrator file that we're saving now. We're going to open it in Photoshop and rasterize it. I know this is a lot of sort of generations of this, but it's the way that I've determined is best for me to do it. You can do it however you want. Okay, so if we go to our customer folder, we get the front preview file, drag it down to Photoshop. It's going to give us the rasterize dialog. We could do this at 72, which is a good resolution for the customer. Turn anti-aliasing on, because for screen it's great. But sometimes we get an artifact with this. Also, we want this to be RGB color because they're going to be looking at it on screen. Sometimes Photoshop will do this, and I don't know why, but my workaround to get rid of this horizontal gap that shows up sometimes is to rasterize at a higher resolution and then to downsample in Photoshop. We'll go open, front preview. Let's do this at 600. I'm going to get rid of the transparent background by going to Layer, Flatten Image. Then I'm going to adjust curves because this black is not black enough. So Image, Mode, or Adjustments, Curves. Get the black eyedropper and click in there. Okay, now we're going to change the resolution. We do this in the image menu in image size. We'll do 72. Here we don't want hard edges. For me, I like bilinear because it doesn't do any sharpening, which doesn't look good with a halftone. Now we're going to zoom in pixel for pixel. See, it says 100% in the corner. So this is, if we were looking at a JPEG on a screen, what you would see. Now I'm going to save as, and I'll save this as a Photoshop PDF. That way you get the nice small file, anti-aliasing, and compression, so it's not going to be big, but it will retain its dimensions. So if they go to print it, it'll be at 100%, which is something you don't always get with JPEG. Okay, at this point I'm ready to send the red separation file, the black separation file, and the preview PDF to my client, who will then forward them to the customer, or at least the preview file to the customer to get them to approve it before he prints directly from these two files. And we see 1200 DPI file, that big, only taking up 1.9 megs for the red and 2.9 megs for the black. It's pretty good. And you would just repeat all these steps without the hassle of the little shield for the back. Thanks for joining me for this tutorial. I'm sure it was horribly exciting. I'll be back with more. Thank you.